Okay, friends, so out there on Zoom, welcome back for this evening's session. And so we're going to be starting the puja now. So as we did last night, we're going to start with just reciting from the Namo Tassa 3 times, and then the precepts, or the 3 refuges precepts, and then go on to some of the other Dhamma reflections. So we'll begin with the Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Saranang Gacchami. Dhammang Saranang Gacchami. Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami. Dutiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami. Dutiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. Tatiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami. Tatiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami. Tatiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. We'll recite the Eightfold Path precepts in English. I undertake the training rule to abstain from taking life. I undertake the training rule to abstain from taking what is not given. I undertake the training rule to abstain from sensual misconduct. I undertake the training rule to abstain from false speech. I undertake the training rule to abstain from speech. I undertake the training rule to abstain from harsh speech. I undertake the training rule to abstain from malicious speech. I undertake the training rule to abstain from wrong livelihood and from intoxicating drinks and drugs causing heedlessness. Such indeed is the Buddha, worthy, perfectly enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, well gone, knower of the worlds, supreme trainer of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and exalted. Well expounded is the Dhamma by the Buddha, directly visible, unaffected by time, calling one to come and see, leading onwards to be realized by the wise. The order of the Buddha's disciples is practicing well. They are of upright conduct. They have entered the right path. They are practicing correctly. That is, the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 kinds of individuals. This order of the Buddha's disciples is worthy of offerings and hospitality, worthy of gifts and salutations, supreme field of merit for the world. With candle lights dispelling dark, I respect the perfect Buddha, the light of the triple worlds, who dispels the darkness of delusion. The Buddha, by this gain liberation. As these flowers fade and wither, so will this body decay and die. All actions are led by the mind. Mind is their master. Mind is their maker. Act or speak with an impure mind, then suffering follows, as the cartwheel follows the foot of the ox. And in the same way, if one acts or speaks with a pure mind, then happiness follows, as your shadow follows you around. If due to negligence I have done some wrong by body, speech, or mind, forgive me of that offense, O Bhante, perfect one of vast wisdom. Forgive me of that offense, O Dhamma, visible and unaffected by time. Forgive me of that offense, O Sangha, practicing well and supreme. I have gained a vast mass of merit, respecting the honorable triple gem. By the spiritual power of that merit, may my obstacles be destroyed. By means of these meritorious deeds, may I never join with the foolish. May I always join with the wise, until the time I attain Nibbana. May the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear-struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. So too may all beings live. Okay, now we're going to recite this dependent origination. Dependent on ignorance, volitional formations arise. Dependent on volitional formations, consciousness arises. Dependent on consciousness, mentality and materiality arise. Dependent on mentality and materiality, the sixfold base arises. Dependent on the sixfold base, contact arises. Dependent on contact, feeling arises. Dependent on feeling, craving arises. Dependent on craving, grasping arises. Dependent on grasping, becoming arises. Dependent on becoming, birth arises. Dependent on birth arises aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Thus there is the arising of this whole mass of suffering. Through the entire cessation of this ignorance, volitional formations cease. Through the cessation of volitional formations, consciousness ceases. Through the cessation of consciousness, mentality and materiality cease, and contact, feeling, craving, grasping, becoming, and birth cease. Through the cessation of birth, aging and death cease, and hence sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair all cease. Thus there is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Through many a birth I wandered in samsara, seeking but not finding the builder of this house. Sorrowful is it to be born again and again. O house builder, thou art seen. Thou shalt build no house again. All thy rafters are broken, thy ridge pole is shattered. This mind has attained the unconditioned, achieved is the end of craving. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Was that those last two verses there that we just recited, those were the first verses that the Buddha uttered after the attainment of his enlightenment. Maybe somebody can pick up those chanting papers and put them back. I'm going to try to find those chats that were left over from yesterday. I'm not sure if I can do that or not. I need my tech over. Was there only that one?
No. That's from today. That's one.
The one from yesterday.
Yeah. Yes, minimize the session.
Is that from yesterday?
No, that's from today. Just a second. this time discuss. It's cool. Let me see. Yes. Make it loud.
This is too confusing.
If there is time, Bhante, could you please discuss the significance of interpersonal interaction and dialogue in the development of insight and an improvement of Dhamma practice versus simply practicing and studying alone? Thank you.
I think I'd rather talk about that one on the last day of the retreat, because it's kind of complicated and take a long time. But basically, I mean, maybe I can answer it shortly. Can't you put it all so I can read it without having to move it? Let me just read these ones.
No, other one's answer, but he want to read it now. Actually, it's not the thing we would like to.
Okay, I can move it this way.
Yeah.
Never mind. The importance of interpersonal dialogue and interaction with others, and developing Dhamma discussions with others and so on. It's very important in our spiritual development, because if we're alone and we don't have these kind of discussions and dialogues with other spiritual friends, then we can, that kind of will fade out of the mind. So the more that we discuss Dhamma, read suttas, or discuss with others and have a dialogue and so on, these are all ways that we keep reinforcing our understanding of the Dhamma. And also, while we are having these discussions and interactions and Dhamma dialogues, we can also practice our mindfulness of our speech and how we're interacting with others, and our feelings and motivations, and how we are answering questions and so on. But certainly studying the Dhamma and gaining a good understanding, so that you can just repeat from memory, aspects of the teaching without having to say, oh, what does it say? And look it up in the book. And, so it's right there in the mind. Because when you're meditating and you get insights, or you're observing things, then this understanding, yeah, that's Sankara, that's perception. That's how they interact. You've already heard these things before. So when you actually see it occurring in your mind, then you have, you already have some background that, that's the way it is. Otherwise, you might be doubting, what is this? So that's why the study of the Dhamma and the suttas is, at least from the Theravada standpoint, important to have that, what is called the Sutramaya Panya, or the understanding that comes from reading and hearing Dhamma talks, so that when the things are actually happening in your experience, you say, oh yeah, that's supposed to happen, that's okay. And hopefully be able to understand it more clearly. Okay, let's go on to the next one.
This question is, how do you handle aversion when it comes?
Well, when we're meditating, many types of emotions may come up, and aversion, of course, is probably one of the more frequent ones, because aversion is a reaction to unpleasant feeling. whether it's an unpleasant feeling coming from somebody speaking to you that you don't agree with, or it's an unpleasant body feeling, or it's an unpleasant sound, you're having aversion, somebody's playing some music or making noise and you're getting irritated. So yes, first you recognize aversion. And that's where the recognition of the mental state. Aversion is arising now. And you understand, how does this aversion arise? Because of the sound, and because my previous aversion to this sound, aversion comes up as an automatic habit. And I've practiced these habits in the past. And so it comes on its own. And so that's one understanding. So you bring this understanding to bear on this aversion. How is this aversion arising? It doesn't just come out of the blue. It comes because of contact. So you hear a sound, goes into the memory, say, I heard this sound before, I didn't like it, and now I'm not liking it now. Or any other sensory thing. But apart from that, you don't dwell on what caused the aversion, but you try to feel the aversion and what it's doing in you and what kind of feelings it's generated. Maybe it's causing some muscles to tighten up, or other thoughts about it may come, but you try to just be aware of the aversion itself. If you think about who caused the aversion, then that may increase that aversion. But if you just identify the emotion itself without tracing it back to what caused it, then it will vanish quite quickly, because the aversion only stays there when you're reinforcing it with the cause of it. And you're saying, yes, that person said this, I have the right to get angry. And so you're letting the mind get more angry, because it's identified with the source of that anger or the source of the sadness. Maybe somebody died, so you're feeling sad. Instead of reflecting on that person who died, just sadness. What is the cause of sadness? Well, because you didn't get what you want, something happened. And just try to feel what it's doing in your body. What does that sadness feel? Is it a heavy mental state? Is it kind of a darkness? Is it kind of confusion? And you, by observing those things and not reinforcing it with the object that caused it, they will vanish quite quickly, because they need that feedback loop. Everything needs a feedback loop. If we cut the feedback loop, the thing vanishes, because its nature is impermanent. So these are some of the ways that we can deal with the aversion. Now, if it's really strong and it keeps on coming and you're not able to do that, then of course there's antidotes like sending metta to the person that may have caused your aversion, and so on, and and wish that they be well and happy and free from their whatever they might have done to cause the aversion. So there's different ways a person might apply to it, but the best way is to simply observe the emotion itself without trying to reinforce it, and just know that the cause of aversion actually is attachment. Because if you hear somebody on the other side of the world died, you're not going to have sadness too much, right? Oh, it's too bad, But only if it's somebody we like, right? Somebody you have attachment to, then, now you're going to feel lonely, or whatever they used to bring to you happiness, now they're gone. So it's an ego thing. It's the ego that feels sad more than actual sadness for the person who died. Most people might be, except for accidents, of course, like an old person like my mother. I didn't feel sad when my mother died. She wanted to die. She wanted to pass on. So I felt happy for her. She was released from her suffering. She was already 102 years old. So anyway, that's just one example, of course. So What's the next question? You mentioned intention. What is your deepest intention? What is a noble intention? Now, the intention basically is initial urge or wanting to do something. But intention doesn't also come out of nowhere. So usually it's based on a feeling. And so it's again, the unpleasant feeling. So the intention to want to remove the unpleasant feeling arises. So it's the will. Or the intention to think about it. But normally we don't see the intentions because our mindfulness isn't at a deep enough level, because intention actually is the first form of thought, really. And it's where our reactions come from, and the volition. So that's where you're able to break the cycle, is by not giving into that intention. So you see the intention to scratch, and you say, no, I'm not going to scratch. You just observe the sensation for a few moments, relax around it, and don't give in to that desire to want to scratch. Because if you do, that strengthens the habit of aversion. And it also strengthens the sense of yourself and ego. I won, I got rid of that itch, yay! I mean, this is happening on an unconscious level, of course. But so therefore, you examine, is this really going to be necessary? Do I have to go on itching? I'm going to spend my whole life itching everything that comes onto the body. I mean, you're going to get tired, right? So at some point, you have to face that intention and understand what intentions may need attention and what intentions don't need attention. That's part of the wise attention that I mentioned today also, the Yoniso Manasikara. So, and that comes with a lot of practice only. What is the noble intention? I mean, there's intentions to do good and there's the intentions to do unskillful things. So that's also what we have to, when we see an urge to come up, is this what I'm about to do? Is it going to be something that's going to cause trouble for myself and others, or both? And if you see, yes, it might, like the intention to tell a lie, because if you're caught, then some trouble might come to you. And so that would be an unnoble intention, like to break any of the precepts. So whenever intention arises, you have to know what is the wholesome intention. That means without greed, hatred, or delusion. And what is the unwholesome intention? That which has attachment, aversion, and ego-centered selfishness connected with it. And so all of this is part of that wise attention, being able to discern what is unskillful attention that leads to suffering and what is skillful attention that leads to the reduction of suffering. And of course, the intention to want to develop the path of meditation and to develop the path to liberation would be one of the most noblest kinds of intentions. Oh, there's that question. What are the four elements of vibrations? Well, the four elements are called the Chatu Mahabhuta in the Pali. And basically it means the earth vibration, the fluid vibration or water vibration, the heat element, heat vibration, which means any range of temperature, even cold. So you could call it the temperature vibration. And the motion vibration or wind element. So traditionally they're called the earth element, fire element, water element, and wind element. But you have to understand the meaning of them, because today, all matter is comprised of just energy vibrations, ultimately, quantum physics. So there's no solid matter as such. But these are electromagnetic vibrations. That's what's going around the electrons and the atoms. The electrons going around the atoms and getting magnetized, and many atoms going around, molecules. Or, I'm not a physicist, so I may not explain that perfectly. And then you get cells, and this whole body is just billions, as we've already discussed. But basically, it's just these energy vibrations. So these elements are. And some of those vibrations appear to be solid. So when you push your skin, you feel some solid resistance. So that's called the earth vibration. It's not really the earth, but it means something solid, because when you step on the earth, it feels solid. So they just call it the earth element. But it's because it has the characteristic of having resistance to it. You can push it, touch it, and it has that resistance. So anything that you can feel in the body that feels solid or hard, or in the world, I touch that, that's called the earth vibration, because it's just a vibration coming through your senses. But then because of memory, you call it the floor, my arm, my this, my that, my teeth, so all the bones and flesh in the body are part of that earth vibration. Then you have the water vibration. So all those electrons and molecules, they're creating water, right? H2O and all that stuff. So that's also the material vibration, but it has a characteristic of being fluid. And that's the way we identify it. Tears, urine comes out, or blood, pus, anything that is a fluid nature that you feel. You feel a tear, your eyes are closed, but you feel a tear running down the cheek, and you go, oh, that's a tear coming down. But it's just a water vibration. But because of your past memory, you identify it as a tear coming down. Otherwise, you wouldn't know what it was. So we identify these vibrations as being sort of real things and belonging to me, rather than just seeing them as vibrations. And then that's when we get disturbed by them and form attachments and aversions. So it's a the 4-element contemplation. It's a very skillful type of meditation to help wean the mind away from all of its obsession with objects and its attachment to objects and so on. So it's a very deep type of meditation. So in meditation, that is the way we train our mind. When you feel something, instead of saying that's my hand's touching, it's earth vibration. Or any other things that you feel in the body, just vibrations. Because in reality, that is what they are. So that's part of seeing reality as it is. Okay, is that all? Okay. So now we have some questions that were written down today by the people taking this in-house retreat. Okay, here's a question. When you say webcam, does web mean the spider web of the six senses that are impinged by the sixth sense stimulus? Well, how many people heard me mention the word webcam today? You can raise your hand out there in Zoom land if you heard me use the term webcam. Well, that's just something I came up with because it refers to the consciousness. It refers to the inherent awareness that's like a movie camera. So they have webcams that, show an eagle's nest, right? You put a webcam up, showing an eagle's nest for a week and chicks being born. I mean, but it's just a webcam. It's not talking. It's not doing anything. It's just, it's just recording the facts, what's coming into its range. It's just recording it. So the same way, our awareness is like a webcam. That means it's there and it's focused on the web of the nervous system. And so it's aware when something is coming through the ear, it picks it up. Something is, when something is coming through the nose, the mouth, the skin, the mind, it picks it up. And so that's what I mean by the webcam. And that's always going on, except normally we're not paying attention to it because we're lost in the outside world. But anytime you focus your attention, you withdraw your attention back into the body and are able to hold it there and using that, learning how to, move your attention to feel different parts of the body. If I say feel your foot, immediately you just, you can kind of just feel your outline of your feet, sensations in your feet, or then to feel your hands, or feel your head. So, that's the same way if you're holding a handheld movie camera, right? You can do that too. You can move the movie camera down and film your feet on the ground, or, you can turn around and film yourself. So our mind is that way too. We have the ability to do that. It just requires some practice. It's not that difficult, but that's how we keep the attention focused in the body and are able to then develop this type of detached observation, because it creates this sort of detached observation, just like a webcam is a kind of a detached observation of things. So that is one of the powers of the mind that we develop in the practice of mindfulness. Now the term spider web is basically just that sense of all the parts of the body being connected through the nerves, the nervous system, in like a spider web. If you've ever seen a picture of a nervous system, basically it looks like that. And the spider would be the webcam at the edge, sitting at the edge. So you fix your webcam at the edge of the spider web, right? So that's what we're doing basically when I say, okay, focus the attention behind the eyes, try to feel the outline of the body. You're fixing the webcam sort of at the edge of the web. And then anything that touches the web in there, from your toe to your ear and all points in between, it lights up or vibrates that, and you notice that. Different arising and vanishing. So that's kind of how we try to cultivate that type of awareness, because it leads to deeper and deeper insights and to develop. It's really the natural mind. But our normal consciousness has been so conditioned and programmed, we've lost that natural sort of present moment, detached awareness. So this question, do you apply impermanence to form, feeling, perception, the Sankaras or reactions in consciousness and meditation? We don't apply it, we observe it. So impermanence is the characteristic of those 5 aggregates. Those material vibrations are always changing, and we can feel that. I mean, when you're feeling the body, you just feel this mass of just changing sensations, and all the sounds that are constantly just zipping in and out, through the ears, and other sensations. That's the impermanence. You don't apply it, you observe it. Because the characteristic of everything is it arises and vanishes. But they seem to last, but they're arising and vanishing hundreds and thousands of times in succession, and we don't see the breaks between them, the gaps between them, because we're clinging, because the mind is clinging too tightly to them. Or our awareness is so slow that we don't see the impermanence. That's why we have to speed up our rate of perception in order to see that rapid arising and vanishing. And that's why we do that by observing the body's sensations, because that's the easiest thing. You can see how so many different sensations are just, arising and vanishing all over. And then once we do that, we see how so many sounds are coming through the ears, sometimes 5 or 10 at the same time. Sound from above, sound from the right side, sound from the left side, sound from underneath, sounds from inside the body, some from outside the house. You'll be blown away sometimes at how many things you can see crystal clearly arising and vanishing. But that only occurs when the mind is in a very deep state of concentration. And that's why most people don't get to that level. And so, but we can get a taste of that happening. Do the 3 characteristics apply to the 5 aggregates? The 3 characteristics are impermanent. So all the 5 aggregates are impermanent. That means they're constantly changing. All these things are perceptions. With every sensation, the perceptions are changing, and the reactions. And the consciousness is arising and vanishing. And so you can't see that unless you've got that webcam primed up and charged up, and you have that concentration that's sitting there, focused on that web. But a lot of people, they get drowsy. How are you going to see anything when your mind is drowsy? Or getting disturbed by various pains, or lost in some fantasy. That's why those hindrances have to be weakened to a great extent before any of that is going to become very clear. And that's why it's most people find it very difficult to do, because they don't spend that much time in the practice. But we'll talk more about that later. So the first of the 3 characteristics is impermanent. Then, based on things being impermanent, in fact, the Buddha gave a lecture on these 3 characteristics. He was asking the monks, what do you think? Are form, feeling, perception, and consciousness permanent or impermanent? They said, impermanent, Venerable Sir. Oh, they're impermanent. Yeah, they're always changing. Then the Buddha asked him, well, what is impermanent and always changing and not able to control it? Is that something, does that lead to a state of happiness? And they say, no, Venerable Sir. We want to hold these things, but we can't. They're always changing. So that's why they're called dukkha, they're suffering, because they lead to suffering. Because we want to hold them, but they're vanishing. Or they're the unpleasant sensations, we're holding on to them by reacting to them. They persist instead of ceasing. If you don't pay attention to a painful sensation, it'll, sort of drop away and vanish. So whatever is impermanent, that's not a source of lasting happiness. Okay, it might bring temporary happiness, but we're interested in some lasting happiness. But because the things don't last, they can't be a source of lasting happiness. And then because of that, because they're impermanent and they're not a source of lasting happiness, is it right to say, this is mine, this is myself, this is me? And they said, no. That means, is there any controller? Can you own or control these things? And we see we cannot. Can you tell your body not to get sick? If conditions are right, the body's going to get sick. You can't control it. You can take some pills and try to, overcome it. But, like with this COVID thing, right? People are getting COVID even still now after 2 years. They can't control it. Maybe with a vaccine, but or your feelings and perceptions. So only in the various high states of meditation you might be able to temporarily sort of control them, but normally. So anyway, those are the three characteristics. And they apply to the 5 aggregates because there's nothing in the world apart from the 5 aggregates. Anything you could possibly think about or feel or see or hear is one of the 5 aggregates. So all those things pertain, those 3 characteristics are pertaining to the 5 aggregates. Well, 5 aggregates seem to be a popular topic. Huh? Can we stop to be caught in the cycle of the 5 aggregates while living in a distorted and conditioned world? Look, the 5 aggregates aren't the problem. It's the attachment to the 5 aggregates that's the problem. And there's another question in here somewhere that I had read a little while ago. Even Arahants still have the 5 aggregates, but they don't have suffering because they're called the aggregates of clinging. So there's 5 aggregates and there's the 5 aggregates of clinging. It's the clinging that causes the suffering. That means the identification of these aggregates as belonging to me or being attached to them with the desire and aversion, creating karma around them. But somebody who's developed a high degree of mindfulness, and especially, let's say, an Arahant, who has purified the mind of greed, hatred, and delusion, they still have the 5 aggregates, but they don't have clinging to them, so they don't suffer from them while the person is still living. So it's not really the aggregates that are the big problem, it's the clinging and attachment to them that causes the suffering. Although, yes, the aggregates do, even the body. Like the Buddha also had, but when he got old and was 80 years old and his body was giving some pains, he used to tell the monks, okay, I'm going to retire and, rest the body, it got pains in. But his mind wasn't really suffering on account of that. There was some detachment there, but still he still had to endure, but he endured it with with equanimity and detachment. And also he had to hear about the stupid antics of different monks doing foolish things, or different people doing foolish things. And he had to deal with these kind of problems, but he dealt with them in a very skillful ways. So he still had the aggregates. He had to hear things. He had perceptions and feelings, but he wasn't clinging to them. He knew that they were just conditioned phenomenon. And he just, as long as he had the body, you're still going to experience the world. Now, if you wanted to go into a specific meditation and sit down and focus, he could go into formless jhana and then lose those aggregates temporarily, and not even be aware of the body or the feelings and perceptions, and stay in those states for hours if you wanted to. So there is that possibility to totally detach from the aggregates if one was reached the level of attaining formless jhanas and so on. But not many people are probably going to be reaching those levels. Oh, yeah, this is a similar question. Is there discontinuation of the aggregates for the Arahant? No, there's not a discontinuation of them. There's a discontinuation of the clinging to them. That's all. And then, of course, when the Arahant finally dies, then the aggregates get disbanded and they don't come together again in any future type of life. And so the Arahant and the Buddha, they hear, see, taste, smell, and touch everything that other people do, but they're doing that with wisdom. And they're doing that from a state where the mind is not attached to these things and don't create them any vexation. So that's why they can endure, all kind of discomforts and other things, and don't get disturbed when people use bad words or anything else. But the normal person does. They, get affected. Oh, they hurt me. They said that. And always, struggling and reacting to things. That's the dukkha. When you have equanimity, you have understanding that all these things are just empty vibrations, and you're deeply centered within, and that ego consciousness is largely gone, then the world no longer bugs you in the same way. And when we talk about dualistic consciousness, you have to kind of clarify that. It means, it can have different meanings, but from the Theravada viewpoint, it means when the sense of the I that is seeing has gone down, and there is seeing and so on, but the sense of I is not very strong, or it's kind of not there. But there still is seeing and hearing, smelling, touching, and thinking. But there's no dualistic antagonism. There's no energy going back and forth. Where in dualistic consciousness, the ego is going out to examine and judge and then react with aversion, attachment, and so on to the objects that it's experiencing. So that's one meaning of the dualistic, the mind caught in duality. But when the sense of the self is removed, then on one subtle level, there still is a kind of duality, but it's not really causing much suffering. And here's another analogy to kind of hopefully illustrate that a bit. there's three things involved in our sense experience. There's the knower, which is the I, the me, and the known. So the known are the five aggregates or the six senses. That means you're seeing things, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, thinking objects. So there's the knower, and when the senses are impinged, the known arises. So that's like the two poles. And what's in the middle? What's between the knower and the known? Awareness. But because we're locked in dualistic consciousness, what happens when you hear a sound, the mind in its rush jumps over the knowing to attack the known with attachment or aversion or other types of thoughts. It kind of jumps over that. And so, but that's what the mind is doing every time. It, in its rush to attack or react to the sense impingements, it jumps over that buffer zone of the mind. So, in the practice of meditation, it's very skillful, very methodical. First, you focus on the known and you try to stop reacting to the known by saying it's just a hearing vibration. It's not somebody called me a dirty so-and-so. It's just hearing. Now, if you had the perception that somebody's cursing at you, then you're going to get angry. But if it's just hearing, you're not creating the scenario of somebody's calling me a name, or you're not even having the feeling that I am me or somebody, that reaction doesn't occur. So as you're practicing mindfulness and applying this understanding about everything is just vibration, empty vibrations, and so on, and have that sort of detached webcam going on, then the mind is, the observer, the known kind of disappears, because the known only stays in your mind if you're paying attention to it and reacting to it. Otherwise, if you're tuned into the flow of impermanence and just being aware from moment to moment, rising and vanishing, there's no time for the known to stick out in the mind because it's already vanished. And so when the known kind of disappears, when you're in a deep state of awareness, and the mind is no longer has time to, or is identifying any objects as being such and such, or with memory and all that, it seems like they kind of disappeared. And so now the known has disappeared. I hope you can follow this train of thought. But now you still have the knower, but now some of the knowing becomes evident because now there's no known. So the mind goes out, but there's no known, so it experiences the knowing, the awareness itself. And then then the mind turns back onto the knower and dissolves the knower and saying, oh, even this knower is just an illusion. And dissolves the knower. And when the knower dissolves, then there's the pure knowing. So that's the process, really, the process of the mindfulness and the insight meditation is understanding that. The knower, the known, and the knowing. We don't know anything about knowing right now because we're too attached to the knower and the known. So the whole Vipassana system is about weaning the mind off of the known and then eventually eliminating the knower. But the knower will be eliminated by itself because the knower gets its existence from the known. And there's a feedback loop. between the known and the knower. And they keep feeding each other and reinforcing each other. But when that cycle is broken, they vanish. And that's how you experience then the pure, non-dualistic awareness. The duality is the knower and the known. Anyway, there's a lot to, learn and study there, but it's, it's very interesting. But if you don't have some of these ideas, see, some of this kind of intellectual understanding is what, when you're observing these things, you can bring these sort of images to bear and help to get the kind of an insight about it. But if you don't have anything to kind of reflect on, the mind can just, space out or just say wowie wooey, but not really develop any detachment to it and so on. That's why people who took LSD and other psychedelic drugs in the 60s and 70s, they had these experiences and they go wowie wooey, but they didn't know how it happened. And, like myself, I almost killed myself because, I didn't understand what was happening in the mind and almost jumped off a building. But fortunately, I came to my senses and, but if that happened now, I wouldn't have been lured into wanting to do something. So that's the danger. Okay. Okay. Now, is there any new questions that anybody typed up from? There's no more chats. All right, okay. If any of you out there in over Zoom, based on any of those things we might have been talking about now, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, you could. A chat. So the last thing is the knower disappears. Yes, only in the very highest developed sort of realization. Yes, the sense of the I that are meditating. First you have the idea that I am meditating, and then you have to make the effort to, sit straight and bring your mind back all the time. And so there's, the I is trying to control everything, and turn off the stereo and, make everything. So the ego is quite involved in the beginning in the meditation, right? But as you go on practicing, and as I already mentioned, learn to analyze the known into just elements, vibrations, and restrain oneself from reacting to them by the different methods the Buddha has suggested. That gradually the mind stops its craving and desire. When we're starting to feed off the happiness of the present moment, and we're not so needy with the external world, we don't go out of our way to want to do something. Like most people, they can't be satisfied and contented, right? They work all week and they say, wow, I need a day off. I need a day off. I'm so tired. And what do they do on their day off? Go out and play golf, or go do something. Why can't they just sit quietly in their house and do nothing? They wanted to do that, didn't they? You should be able to just sit for hours and hours without any desire to do anything, just feeding off the natural pleasant feelings that are arising from the present moment awareness. A person should be able to do that, but most people can't. So they always want to do things. I mean, actually, they call us human beings, isn't it? Anybody heard that term, human being? But actually, a better term is a human doing, because we're always going on doing something. Even in sleep, the mind goes on doing, dreaming. So very few people have experienced what you could call real being. That means being in the present moment without any desires to do anything, just sort of feeding off the artesian well of contentment and happiness and awareness and wisdom that's available at any time if one knows how to tap into it. But people have lost that skill, lost that art. So that's the problem. So we let go of the knower, and then, as I already mentioned, the known, and the knower will vanish as long as you are remaining in that state of awareness and not reinforcing it. It will vanish because itself is nothing but a mental bubble. It's just an illusion. Okay. Another question here. Is there a time interval for the present moment? Well, as I mentioned, the flow of impermanence, the mind is made up of these mind moments of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking. And then I gave the example of a graph, right? Like this. And each impingement of the senses would be a spike in the graph like that, with the consciousness arising to cognize a sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thought. And then it would vanish back down we're talking about, nanoseconds, even faster than a nanosecond. But that's a vanishing, and there's a tiny gap there. Now, if you can stay in that gap without clinging to the next arising, that's the present moment, or that's the time interval. So it's the gap between the mind moments. But only you can stop those mind moments through samadhi only through a very deep state of concentration. It's where you stop those graph spikes all the time. So that's the present moment is that baseline. But our conscious mind is stuck above that baseline all the time. And a very strong impingement, that graph goes way up high, like a really strong pain, and that graph would really peak up. But if it's just some subtle, mild sensations, it would just be a little, very, little ones like that. And all of a sudden there's a big spike and it comes back down. So those big spikes are strong impingements, like a loud sound or a sharp pain or a smell or something you react to. Or things like that. So that causes those high spikes in the graph. And those high spikes are where the sense of self is also very strong. But then when those spikes are smaller, That's why these EKGs and so on are very, very interesting, and can tell you a lot about your mind, because or even a polygraph test, because they can tell even an unconscious thought, That's all mental activity. But like on a dead person or somebody's unconscious, they give you a flat line. They say the person's dead because there's no more activity. Anyway, so these are all just interesting things to, to kind of inquire about and or try to understand as you develop your own attention. I mean, all this understanding and wisdom will arise when you develop that and balance mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, and going through that process of letting go of the known and see the diminishing of the knower, and finally experiencing that flat line of knowing. Is the Arahant always in the present moment all the time, except during sleep? Well, it's that even in sleep they have awareness. They rest. So the experience of an Arahant or a Buddha would be similar to, let's say you have an open window in your house. And let's say you're sitting in the windowsill. And the outside is there and the inside is there. And you can effortlessly, see the inside, you can effortlessly see the outside without even turning your head too much. When you want to look inside, boom, instantly you see emptiness. If you want to see outside, okay, there's a tree, there's a dog there, okay, there's somebody coming up the driveway. But there's no clinging to that. There's no fear, worry, anxiety. So it doesn't mean you lose awareness. But the mind has that ability. If they want to look at something, they can look at it. And if they don't want to look at it, they don't need to look at it. So whenever there's nothing particularly to do, they're resting in the knowing. But if something arises, a loud sound is heard and they happen to hear it, if they so choose, they can decide to look at it. Or, somebody came and asked the Buddha, oh, there's a sick monk, he wants to see you. And so the Buddha out of compassion, okay, I'll go and visit the sick monk, interaction. You can do all those things. But his mind was always in the present moment, but that present moment doesn't mean you're not aware of things. And to understand that, only you have to get that experience to understand it. So, but during sleep, I mean, when of course the senses would be shut down, but it doesn't sleep unconsciously or dream. It said that they don't dream. They would have awareness, would be glowing, but it wouldn't be, there would be no knower and known. It would just be the knowing is still awake. When most people go to sleep, they lose that knowing because they're either dreaming or they're unconscious. Okay, so again, I think maybe that will be enough for this evening's discussion. And so we'll prepare for the evening meditation. Okay, so let's mindfully stand up and do a little standing awareness to relieve any buildup of discomfort in the legs. Let's try to take 6 or 9 of those 3-part breaths. After breathing in, hold the air in the lungs a few seconds. Imagine or feel an oxygenated blood flooding the body nervous system with oxygen, charging up the cell. And feel the last bit of air go out of the lungs on the out breath, resting the mind in the present moment, the standing body. And then the next in breath. Just breathing in, standing. Hold that air. And breathing out, standing. Breathing in, feeling the whole body. Breathing out, feeling the whole body. And on your own, if you want to do 1 or 2 of those stretches, get the energy moving more, you can do that on your own. I'm not going to lead you through it. Maybe Prashant can follow him. Okay, that's enough. Sit back now. Meditation, we don't need these lights, let it be dark. And just sit straight. And feel the inward curve of the lower spine. Feel the head balanced on top. Take a few more deep, slow breaths, 3-part breath. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Keep recharging the batteries of the webcam. Let us spend the last few minutes of the meditation sending out thoughts of metta, friendliness, best wishes toward ourselves and all other beings. So again, let's take a few deep, slow breaths. As you're breathing in, hold the air in the lungs several seconds. Just imagine or feel that oxygenated blood going out to all the cells, the tissues, charging them up. And just imagine that as sending metta to the cells of your body, charging them up with awareness and wisdom. On the out breath, feel the mind relaxing, settling in the center of the body. Try to take a few more deep, slow breaths like that, cultivating this thought vibration. May I be well, peaceful, and wise. May I be free from excessive attachment and aversion, worry, fear, anxiety. May I be well, happy, and peaceful. May I have the patience, strength, mindfulness, and wisdom to meet and overcome all difficulties in life. May I be able to continue to deepen my understanding of the Dhamma, and the practice of meditation, to help free the mind from confusion and suffering. May I be well, mindful, and wise. Let's continue to take some more deep, slow breaths, and with each out breath, you can feel your heartbeat. With each heartbeat, or with each out breath, just imagine the same kind of metta vibrations and thoughts of friendliness, best wishes going out, sending them back to all your family members and friends. And with each heartbeat or out breath, these waves of metta vibrations going out across the land, the hills and the valleys, through the towns and the cities, going through the bodies and minds of all the beings. Just imagine it soothing the fires of their greed, hatred, and delusion, the fevers of their worry, anxiety, fear. And with each out breath, heartbeat, these waves of vibrations of pure wisdom, pure love, pure energy, going further and further outward across the whole state in all 10 directions. And gradually going out across the ocean, and eventually around the whole earth. If you can imagine it, just imagine the beautiful blue-green earth suspended in space from the NASA photograph. Just imagine these waves of metta, like a warm cloud surrounding the earth, permeating the atmosphere of the earth down to the ground level, these vibrations of pure love, pure energy, pure wisdom. present moment awareness and wisdom, vibration, entering the bodies and minds of all the beings. Just with the idea, may all living beings in the whole world, wherever they might be, living near or far, visible or invisible, the weak, the strong, the rich or the poor. May all living beings be well, happy and peaceful, free from greed, hatred, fear, and ignorance, free from the pains and sufferings of body and mind brought about by their unskillful thought, speech, and action. May all beings have the patience, strength, mindfulness, and wisdom to meet and overcome all difficulties in life. May all beings have the opportunity to hear the mind-healing teachings of the Dhamma and to learn and practice meditation to help free the mind from confusion and suffering. May all beings be able to live peacefully and harmoniously together, understanding the ultimate interconnectedness and interdependence of all things. May all beings be well, peaceful, and wise. May all beings be well, peaceful, and wise. Just like a mantra reverberating throughout space. Well, peaceful, and wise. If you like to join in chanting the word sadhu 3 times slowly, do the chanting on a long out breath. Sadhu. 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 Okay, friends who have been tuning in over the web, Zoom, have a peaceful night's sleep. See you tomorrow morning again, 8:45.